The door that opened the knock came at the worst
Hey, are you
possible
feeling any
moment,
better?
just as the broken pieces of his
I
life
brought you
were
some
finally
groceries.
starting to hold together. It wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made his chest tighten, as though the past itself had returned to demand a reckoning. Ethan Cole stood frozen on the small wooden porch, a paper bag of fresh bread and medicine in his hands, with no idea that the next few seconds would change everything he thought he understood about loss, dignity, and second chances. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing good when no one is watching, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs it. Ethan had never imagined his life could shrink so quickly. 3 months earlier, he had been a dependable operations manager at a respected company, known for his discipline, honesty, and quiet knack for solving problems no one else wanted to touch. Then, in a single afternoon, it was gone. He was called into a glass-walled office and told his services were no longer needed. There was no warning, no real explanation, just cold talk of restructuring and new leadership direction. The man delivering the news never once looked him in the eye long enough to see what it broke inside him. Losing his job wasn't only about income. It was about stability for his 8-year-old daughter, Mia, whose world had already been shaken when her mother died 2 years before. Ethan had promised her things would be okay, but promises grow heavy when your bank account is nearly empty and the rent is due. Even so, he refused to let bitterness take root. Every morning, no matter how uncertain things felt, he kept the same routine. After dropping Mia at school, he stopped at the small house next door to check on Mrs. Alvarez, his elderly neighbor. She lived alone. Her family was scattered across cities too far away to notice. Her hands trembled when she tried to cook, and her eyesight had faded with age. So Ethan helped, fixing a loose cabinet hinge, carrying groceries, making sure her medicine was taken on schedule. At first it was simply a neighborly gesture. Over time it became something more. Mrs. Alvarez reminded him that even when life takes everything away, a person still has something left to give. And helping her, strangely, made his own struggles feel lighter, if only for a while. Days turned into weeks. Rejections piled up. Interviews ended in polite smiles and hollow promises. Ethan sold his watch, then his old tools, then anything else he could spare. Still, every morning he arrived at Mrs. Alvarez's door with a warm smile and whatever little he had to offer. That particular afternoon the air felt different, the sky clear, but the neighborhood strangely still, like the hush before something unknown. Ethan shifted the paper bag in his arm and knocked gently, expecting the familiar shuffle of her footsteps. Instead, the door opened almost at once, and the person standing there wasn't Mrs. Alvarez. It was him, the man who had ended Ethan's career without a second thought. The CEO. The face Ethan had worked so hard to forget now stood a few feet away, framed in the doorway of the house he had been visiting faithfully every single day. For a moment neither of them spoke. Ethan felt his pulse race, his grip tighten on the bag, as confusion and disbelief washed over him. Why was this man here? How did he know Mrs. Alvarez? And why did it feel like more than coincidence? The CEO's expression shifted from mild curiosity to something deeper, recognition, maybe even discomfort. His eyes moved from Ethan's worn clothes to the simple groceries in his hands, lingering there as if trying to read a story he had never bothered to open before. From inside, Mrs. Alvarez's voice called out warmly, unaware of the quiet storm at her door. The sound grounded Ethan, reminding him why he was really there, not for pride, not for revenge, but for something far more important. Without a word, he stepped forward and handed over the bag. His movements were calm, almost gentle, as though refusing to let the past define this moment. He walked past the CEO and greeted Mrs. Alvarez with the same warmth he always brought, checking her medication, setting the bread on the table, making sure everything was in order. But the air in the room had changed. The CEO lingered near the door, watching in silence, something unsettled in his posture, as if he'd stumbled onto a truth he wasn't ready to face. The man who had once been nothing more than a file to close, a name to cut, now stood before him not as a failure, but as someone quietly holding another person's world together. The silence stretched. Eventually, the CEO stepped further inside, visibly out of place in the small, humble room. He took in the modest furniture, the worn photographs on the wall, the quiet evidence of a life built on simplicity and resilience. Then he asked a question, not with the authority of a boss, but with something closer to humility. Mrs. Alvarez answered with a smile, her voice full of gratitude. She spoke of Ethan like family, how he never missed a single day, how he helped without ever expecting anything back, how he showed up when no one else did. Each word seemed to land harder than the last. For the first time, the CEO wasn't looking at an employee. He was looking at a human being. And that realization changed everything. Ethan finished his routine and turned to leave, expecting nothing, wanting nothing. But as he reached the door, the CEO spoke up, not with authority this time, but with something softer, something uncertain. There are moments when life shifts quietly, without noise or drama. This was one of them. The conversation that followed didn't erase the past. It didn't undo the pain of a lost job or the sleepless nights that came after. But it opened a door, not just to opportunity, but to understanding. The CEO admitted something he had never said aloud before, that decisions made from a distance often ignore their human cost, and that in chasing efficiency, he had overlooked the very people who gave his company its strength. Ethan listened, not with anger, but with the quiet steadiness of someone who had endured and grown because of it. Then came something unexpected, an offer, not out of pity, but out of respect. A chance to return, not merely to a job, but to a role where his integrity and compassion would matter as much as any number on a report. Ethan didn't answer right away. For him, this had never been only about employment. It was about dignity, about proving to himself that even in the darkest stretch of his life, he had chosen to stay kind. He glanced back at Mrs. Alvarez, who smiled with quiet pride, as if she'd known all along the kind of man he would choose to be. And in that moment, Ethan understood something simple and powerful. Kindness is never wasted, even when the world doesn't see it, even when it feels like no one is watching. Because one day, in some unexpected way, it finds its way back, not as a reward, but as recognition of who you truly are. Ethan stepped out into the fading light, the weight in his chest replaced by something lighter, hope. Not the kind that promises an easy road ahead, but the kind that reminds you that you are stronger than your struggles, and that doing the right thing will always lead somewhere meaningful, because sometimes the door that opens isn't someone else's. It's your own second chance, waiting on the other side. If this story touched your heart, Please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. And before you go, leave the word kindness in the comments if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life.